In the crumbling shadows of New Argus City, a lawless scrap of a colony on the outer rim of space, Eric Valen found her. She was hunched beneath a flickering neon sign, wrapped in torn fabric, her silver hair caked with soot, violet eyes wide with something between fear and defiance. She wasn't human. And Eric knew in that instant if he walked away, he'd never forgive himself. The night smelled of burnt metal and rain. Gangs prowled the alleys, drones buzzed overhead scanning for fugitives. Helping anyone was dangerous. Helping an alien? That was suicide. But Eric, an ex-freedom fighter turned shipbreaker, had never been good at survival instincts. Slowly, hands open to show he wasn't a threat, he crouched beside her. "You all right?" he asked softly. She flinched, shrinking tighter into herself. A low, almost musical murmur escaped her lips, but the words were alien. "You need help," Eric said. He tugged off his battered leather jacket, scarred from battles long past, and gently draped it over her thin shoulders. She shivered beneath it but didn't pull away. Above them, thunder rumbled, New Argus's toxic storms brewing for another vicious night. Eric glanced around. They couldn't stay here. He offered his hand. At first, she stared at it like it was a snake ready to strike. Then, slowly trembling, she placed her cold fingers in his palm. He pulled her to her feet. "Come on. I know a place." She stumbled after him through backstreets lit only by shattered lampposts and the dim glow of burning trash piles. Once or twice she almost collapsed, but Eric caught her each time, murmuring reassurances he wasn't even sure she understood. Eric lived in the carcass of an old freight terminal, hidden under layers of collapsed buildings. It wasn't much, just a patchwork shelter of scavenged panels, an ancient generator coughing out weak heat, a rusted heater blinking stubbornly in the corner. He set her down on an old crate. Quickly he found some protein bars from his ration stash and pressed one into her hand. She stared at it, unsure. "Food," Eric said, miming taking a bite. Carefully she nibbled it, then wolfed it down with frantic hunger. Eric grabbed another bar and a can of recycled water, watching her with a tight ache in his chest. Whoever she was, whatever had happened to her, she had been through hell. When her breathing calmed and her hunger was sated, she sat curled near the heater, knees drawn to her chest. Her eyes, impossibly large and luminous in the gloom, fixed on Eric. "What's your name?" he asked. Her voice was a whisper of wind and broken song. "Zira." He repeated it, trying to get it right. "Zira." She nodded weakly. Thunder cracked overhead. Rain began to hammer the scrap metal roof. Leaks sprang in several corners, but the heater sputtered on, and for the first time in who knew how long, Zira looked a little less ready to bolt. Eric settled himself near the doorway, rifle resting across his lap. He wasn't sure what he'd just gotten himself into. Harboring an alien was enough to get you executed if the syndicate found out. But somehow, he didn't care. He had seen something in her eyes, something pure, something desperate, something worth saving. And deep down he already knew. This was the start of a fight he couldn't walk away from. Not now. Not ever. The storm raged through the night. Eric didn't sleep. He sat by the doorway, rifle in hand, eyes on the blackened horizon where syndicate patrols might appear. He was used to nights like this, nights where death felt only a heartbeat away. But tonight there was something new. Something fragile. Something precious. Zira. He turned to glance at her. She was curled into a tight ball near the heater, breathing slow but shallow, the lines of exhaustion still etched into her delicate features. Her skin was strange under the dim light, like pale opal shot through with faint veins of shimmering blue. Eric rubbed his temples. What was he doing? He couldn't protect her. He could barely protect himself. Yet when she whimpered in her sleep, twisting away from some nightmare, Eric was beside her before he realized he'd moved. "Hey," he whispered, brushing her hair from her forehead with rough fingers. "You're safe now. I promise." Her eyes fluttered open. For a moment they locked onto his, those deep violet pools, and a crackling current seemed to pass between them. She reached out, hesitant, and touched his hand. It was such a simple thing. Yet it hit Eric like a missile. He squeezed her fingers gently. I'm not gonna let anyone hurt you. Zira's lips moved, forming words Eric didn't understand. But he caught the meaning in her gaze, gratitude and something more. A connection sparking in the darkness, fragile but real. He stayed there until she slipped back into sleep, her fingers still loosely twined with his. By morning the storm had blown itself out, leaving the city streets steaming and slick with acid rain. Eric knew what had to happen next. They needed to move. Staying here was suicide. The syndicate sweepers would eventually sniff out his little sanctuary. As he packed supplies into a battered satchel, Zira watched him silently. She still seemed dazed, weak from hunger and fear. But when Eric motioned for her to follow, she rose without complaint. They slipped out into the misty ruins of New Argus, keeping to the shadows. Eric led the way through half-collapsed marketplaces, burnt-out transport hubs, and skeletal remains of once grand skyscrapers. They reached an abandoned metro station buried deep underground, a place only old rebels like Eric remembered. Inside, faded murals of human colonists stretched across cracked walls. It was strangely peaceful. "This'll do," Eric said, setting down the satchel. "For now." Zira wandered cautiously through the station, tracing fingers over the broken rails, marveling at the corroded old tech. She looked like a ghost haunting a forgotten age. Eric leaned against a pillar, watching her with a strange ache building in his chest. Who was she? Where had she come from? Why was she alone? He wanted to ask. But she could barely speak his language, and besides, maybe the wounds were too fresh to open. Instead, he reached into his satchel and pulled out a scavenged translator chip. "This might help," he said, offering it. Zira studied the tiny device, then nodded. Eric carefully clipped it near her ear. A faint hum filled the air. "Can you understand me now?" he asked. Zira blinked, tilted her head, and then, in a voice rough from disuse but clear, she whispered, "I understand." Eric let out a breathless laugh. "Good. That's good." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Just stood there, breathing in the damp, electric air of the ruined station. Then Zira stepped closer. Her fingers brushed Eric's arm. "You saved me," she said. "Yeah, well," Eric shrugged awkwardly. "Couldn't just leave you out there." Her eyes searched his face as if trying to memorize every line. "You are different," she said softly. "Kind. Strong." Eric chuckled bitterly. "I'm just stubborn." Zira shook her head. "You are hope." The words hit harder than any plasma round. Before he could respond, a sharp metallic clatter echoed from the tunnel entrance. Eric stiffened, instincts kicking into high alert. Zira's body tensed, senses razor-sharp. Her hand flicked toward the sound, a defensive gesture Eric recognized from his years fighting alongside alien freedom fighters. She wasn't just some helpless refugee. She had been trained. Maybe even as a warrior. Another clatter. Voices, gruff, mechanical, filtering through the dust. Syndicate scouts. Eric cursed under his breath. They had found them. He chambered a round into his rifle, the familiar weight of it grounding him. "Stay close," he told Zira. "And when I say run, you run." She nodded, no fear in her face now. Only fierce, silent understanding. Together, side by side, they melted into the shadows of the station, ready to fight, ready to flee if needed. And somewhere deep inside, Eric realized. This girl wasn't just changing his night. She was about to change his entire war. The tunnel lights flickered as footsteps thundered closer. Eric crouched low behind an overturned bench, rifle raised, heart hammering. He counted at least 3 syndicate scouts, heavily armored, plasma rifles slung over their shoulders. Bad odds. He risked a glance at Zira. She was crouched beside him, eyes narrowed, every muscle taut like a coiled spring. "Can you fight?" he whispered. She didn't answer with words. Instead, she raised her hand, and with a soft hum of energy, a thin blade of shimmering light snapped into existence along her palm. Eric blinked. "Guess that's a yes." The first scout stomped into view, scanning the station with a flickering drone light mounted to his shoulder. Eric lined up his shot, steady, slow. But Zira was faster. She darted out like a phantom, silent as smoke. In a blink, her light blade sliced through the drone's mount, sending it crashing to the floor. Before the scout could even shout, she pivoted and slashed across the weak spot in his armor. He dropped with a heavy thud. The others shouted, spinning toward the commotion. Eric moved then, firing short, brutal bursts. His first shot dropped one scout instantly. The third dove for cover behind a collapsed support beam. Blaster bolts seared the air, flashing blue against the metro's ancient stone. Eric slid across the floor, firing again. His rifle bucked in his hands as the scout's armor sparked and cracked. The soldier slumped over, motionless. Breathing hard, Eric rose, rifle scanning for more. Silence. Only the drip of water from the broken ceiling. Only the smell of burnt ozone and the soft whir of dying tech. He turned, and found Zira standing over the first fallen scout, her blade retracting back into her wrist with a whisper of energy. For a heartbeat they just stared at each other. Eric felt it, something shifted between them. Not just survival. Not just necessity. Trust. Respect. And something deeper neither dared name yet. "You're not just some lost girl," Eric said, breathless. Zira gave a ghost of a smile. "Not anymore." Sirens howled in the distance, more patrols no doubt called by the gunfire. "We have to move," Eric said. Without hesitation, Zira grabbed his hand. Electricity jolted through him at her touch, not fear, not alarm, connection. They ran, side by side, deeper into the old tunnels. Their path twisted through abandoned service routes and forgotten maintenance shafts. Time blurred into frantic, adrenaline-fueled motion. At last they found a hidden maintenance room, a relic from 100 years ago, long buried under layers of urban decay. Eric forced the door open with a grunt and yanked Zira inside. He slammed the heavy panel shut behind them, bolting it. Darkness swallowed them. For a few moments neither spoke. Their breathing filled the tiny space, harsh, ragged, alive. Finally, Eric found an old emergency light and smacked it against the wall. It flickered weakly to life, casting a soft amber glow. In the light, Zira looked breathtaking. Sweat-slicked silver hair clung to her cheeks. Her violet eyes shimmered. There was a thin line of blood along her arm, a minor scrape, but she stood tall, unafraid. Eric stepped closer without thinking. "You're hurt," he said, voice low. Zira shook her head. "It is nothing." Still, Eric tore a strip from his worn-out shirt and gently wrapped it around her arm. His fingers brushed her skin, smooth, warm despite everything. Zira didn't flinch away. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, studying him with that same quiet intensity. "You risked yourself, for me," she said. Eric tied off the makeshift bandage, meeting her gaze. "You didn't exactly sit back either." "I owe you." "You don't owe me anything, Zira," Eric said, meaning every word. There was a long, heavy pause. In the tiny maintenance room, the tension grew thick enough to choke. Zira lifted her hand and placed it against Eric's chest, right over his heart. "You gave me more than shelter," she whispered. "You gave me a place to belong." Eric's heart stuttered. He covered her hand with his own. Outside, the sirens faded, lost in the maze of tunnels. But inside this tiny room, another battle raged, a gentler one. A battle between fear and hope. Between scars of the past and the fragile, precious possibility of something new. Without thinking, Eric leaned closer. Their foreheads touched. Not a kiss. Not yet. But a promise. "I'm not letting you go," Eric whispered. Zira closed her eyes, a single tear slipping free. "Then neither am I." And in the ruins of a dying city, among broken dreams and fallen empires, two souls, human and alien, chose to fight for each other. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The maintenance room's thin door wouldn't hold forever. Through the cracks, Eric could already hear syndicate boots clanging against steel. Dozens of soldiers now, an entire detachment sent after them. Eric glanced at Zira. She was calm. Too calm. "There's no way out," he said, rifle clutched tight. "I'll buy you some time. Run when you can." Zira turned to him slowly. Her violet eyes were glowing. "Eric," she said softly. "There's something you must know." The metal walls began to vibrate as syndicate soldiers set up breaching charges. "No time for confessions," Eric snapped. "Get ready to." But he stopped. Because Zira was changing. Energy pulsed under her skin, lighting up intricate silver patterns etched into her flesh, like living circuits. Her entire body shimmered with power barely held in check. "What are you?" Eric breathed. Zira's voice trembled, but she met his gaze squarely. "I am not just alien. I was made, engineered, to be a weapon." Explosions rocked the hallway outside. The door buckled inward. Terror spiked through Eric, not fear of Zira but fear for her. What had they done to her? She stepped forward, one hand lifting. The air itself thickened, humming with force. "They hunted me because I ran," she said. "I refused to be their tool. I chose to be something else." The final lock shattered. Syndicate soldiers stormed in. "Down!" Eric roared, raising his rifle. But he didn't have to shoot. Zira moved like a star-gone supernova. Waves of pure kinetic force exploded from her, flinging soldiers backward like ragdolls. Their weapons melted into slag midair. The ceiling cracked, raining dust and debris. Screams filled the station. More troops flooded in, heavier armor, heavy plasma cannons. A barrage of blinding fire lit up the tiny room. Zira strode forward, untouched. With a sweep of her arm, she sent an invisible shockwave slamming into the attackers, crumpling metal and bone alike. She wasn't fighting like a soldier. She was fighting like a force of nature. Through it all, Eric stood frozen, awe crashing through him. Not because she was dangerous. Because she was beautiful. Because she was free. And because she had chosen him. When the dust finally settled, the hallway was a wreck. The soldiers lay scattered, groaning or unconscious. Zira staggered slightly, her glow flickering. Eric rushed to her side, catching her before she fell. "You didn't have to do that alone," he said fiercely, holding her close. Zira leaned into him, trembling. "I had to show you," she whispered. "All of me. Even the broken parts." Eric cupped her face in his hands. Her skin was still warm, still so very alive. "I don't care if you're broken," he said. "I'm not here for perfect. I'm here for you." Their lips met, not fierce, not frantic, but deep and true. In that kiss, Eric tasted everything, her fear, her hope, her fierce need to belong somewhere with someone. When they finally broke apart, Zira's eyes shimmered with tears. "You are different," she murmured. "You make me want to be better," Eric replied. They didn't have much time. The syndicate would regroup. They would come again and harder. But Eric didn't care. He had made his choice. He would stand with her against the universe if he had to. Hand in hand, they sprinted away from the ruined station, deeper into the wild city ruins. Beyond the city, stars beckoned. Beyond the ruins, freedom waited. But first, they would have to win it. Together. They didn't stop running until the first pink streaks of dawn brushed the crumbling skyline. Eric and Zira hid among the skeletal ruins of an old flight terminal, breathing hard, their hearts pounding in sync. In the distance, a syndicate dropship whirred low, scanning for them with sweeping floodlights. The hunt wasn't over. Zira leaned against a rusted beam, her body still faintly aglow from the battle. She looked fragile and fierce all at once, an impossible contradiction that Eric found utterly breathtaking. "We can't just keep running," he said, wiping blood from his forehead. Zira nodded grimly. "They'll never stop. Not until I'm theirs again or dead." Eric looked out over the broken city. His hand found hers, callous palm against smooth alien skin. "Then we end it," he said. "Here. Tonight." Her violet eyes widened slightly. You're not alone anymore, Eric said simply. Something shifted between them. A silent vow. Together they began planning. The flight terminal had one thing left, an old defense array, half buried under rubble. Still operational if they could reach it, and strong enough to take down a syndicate ship. It would be suicide. It would be freedom. By twilight, syndicate forces closed in. Dozens of soldiers. Combat drones. Heavily armed exosuits. The ground shook with their advance. But Eric and Zira were ready. Hidden among collapsed girders, they launched their first strike, explosives cobbled together from old tech, blasting a path through the ranks. Syndicate soldiers regrouped fast. Plasma fire lit up the ruins, turning the twilight blood-red. Zira unleashed her powers again, but this time Eric fought at her side. While she shattered enemy lines with pure force, Eric picked off drones and gunners with ruthless precision. His old soldier instincts kicked in, sharpening every move. The air turned electric with fury and fire. Zira took a hit, plasma grazing her side, but she gritted her teeth and kept moving. Eric shielded her, ignoring the searing pain as shrapnel tore into his arm. They reached the defense array. "Do it!" Eric shouted, covering her as best he could. Zira knelt by the ancient controls, her hands moving in a blur. Sparks flew. Systems booted up with a groan that echoed across the ruins. Above them, the syndicate dropship hovered, its cannons charging. Zira fed her energy into the array, her whole body blazing like a living star. The weapon locked on. With a sound like the world breaking, a searing beam of light lanced into the sky. Straight through the dropship's core. The ship exploded, raining fire and twisted metal across the syndicate ranks. Panic broke them. Without air support, their soldiers faltered. Some fled. Some surrendered. The ruins fell silent at last. Eric stumbled to Zira's side. She collapsed against him, exhausted but smiling, a real smile full of life and triumph. "You did it," he said, brushing dust from her glowing face. "We did it," she corrected, voice thick with emotion. In the burning aftermath, surrounded by ruin and rebirth, Eric kissed her again, this time not out of desperation but out of hope. When they pulled apart, he pressed his forehead against hers. "What now?" she whispered. Eric looked up at the stars piercing the smoky night sky. "Now," he said, "we build something new. Together." He squeezed her hand. "Somewhere the syndicate will never touch again. Somewhere you're free to be everything you are." Tears welled in her violet eyes, but they were tears of joy. Hand in hand, they walked into the darkness. Toward a future they would forge together. No longer homeless. No longer hunted. No longer alone. Just two hearts, alien and human, choosing each other against the odds. Sparkles, if you loved Eric and Zira's story, imagine what adventures come next. Would you fight for love across the stars? Would you risk everything for someone who finally sees the real you? Rocket, the universe is vast, and this was only the beginning.